So the craziest thing happened. For a while now, I had been planning on doing a video called, the case for the Cyber SUV, and then the day before I planned on doing it, Art happens to drop this quick sketch of a Cyber SUV. So I love shouting out his work because I think he brings a lot of what we talk about in these videos to life and finally gives some good visualizations for, production-ready versions of the Cybertruck. But without any coordination, he just happened to make that right on time. So thanks once again to Art for making that. It's not exactly what I had in mind, but still a great visual nonetheless. And essentially the case I'm trying to make here is that, Tesla, they're very busy right now. I get it. They're preoccupied with lots of different projects, but eventually, once they ramp the 4680s, once Giga Texas is done, and once Giga Shanghai is mass producing Model 2, and Giga Berlin is mass producing Model 4, or whatever they build over there, eventually, I think if Tesla plans on selling tens of millions of vehicles per year, they're gonna need a bit more diversification. So it's always kind of fun to dive into the use cases and the vehicles that they haven't quite broken into yet. And yeah, we can debate all day on what's more important. No, they should do a van first. No, they should do a Model 2 first. No, they gotta work on getting them cheaper. Yeah, I know. There's all kinds of priorities right now, and I'm not saying Tesla needs to unveil a Cyber SUV at some point in the next year or even 2 years, because Tesla's main focus is where it matters most right now, which is ramping up the 4680 cells. That's the main issue. But one demographic that I feel like could be a huge high-in-demand vehicle for Tesla is, of course, a full-size SUV. I'm not talking a crossover, and if you guys caught my R1S versus Model X video, you know that I think the Model X, while it is a very cool car with a lot of impressive technology in it, loses a lot of practicality when it comes to trying to fit 7 full-size adults into a vehicle and trying to maximize cargo space, especially when it comes to affordability. Now that the Model X is a $90,000 starting price vehicle, I would love to see that price come down over time, but even then you can't even put a roof rack on the Model X because of those Falcon Wing doors, and all Teslas right now still max out with a seating arrangement of 7 on the Model Y, which you guys saw how I try to fit in the third row. It's very, very tight, and on the Model X it's a lot more comfortable, but even just adding the extra 7 seats adds another $3,500 to the overall price. So we're talking, in order to get full, 7 adults into a Tesla and do it comfortably, you basically gotta drop $93,000, which is a bit insane. And as we've talked about with the Cybertruck many times on this channel, I'm a huge fan of the functionality, the practicality of how many different use cases you have, the insane amount of cargo space you have. The Cybertruck still has a frunk, it has a huge bed and a vault that can cover that up, and similar to how the R1S is very similar to the R1T, they have their pickup truck, and of course they also have a version that replaces the bed with a third row, so you have more enclosed cabin space. I would love it if Tesla could do that same thing with the Cybertruck, because for one, the design has already become incredibly iconic. Elon talked about it on the latest Joe Rogan podcast. He says how it feels like it's CGI in real life when you see it in person. It's incredible, and I love how durable the steel and the Tesla armored glass is. It just will give you all kinds of new confidence when leaving your car in public areas, and you're not worried about other people hitting their doors against it, and you're not worried about bullets getting through the exoskeleton because it is bulletproof. And the inside of the Cybertruck is my favorite interior of any car, and I know that's an extreme personal preference thing, but I love the minimalism, I love how clean it looks in there, and I love the idea of big Tesla vehicles. That's why I'm kind of a huge fan of the Semi, and also really excited to see the Cybertruck hit the market. But Cybertruck taps out at seating of 6, and maybe there's some heavy modification that could go on, but if Elon really wants to fit all of his kids plus Grimes into one vehicle, he's gonna need a 9-seater, and that would be possible with the Cyber SUV because the front 2 rows could be very similar to that of the Cybertruck. You have your middle seat that most of the time is probably going to be folded down and act like as cup holders and armrests at the same time, but with the Cyber SUV you would simply replace the 6.5-foot bed in the back with a third row, and it would be very similar to that of the second row, which would mean that yeah, you have a middle seat that can fold down, act as an armrest, but when you really want to, you could technically fold that middle section up and theoretically and legally fit 9 people into a single vehicle, and this thing would still look like a tank, okay? It wouldn't have the bed in the back, but because the Cybertruck is so massive, and we know how Tesla loves to cram those little third row seats into the back of the Model Y, I think it could be very comfortable back there, knowing how wide and tall the Cybertruck is going to be. Most recently though, Elon has said now on the latest Joe Rogan podcast that they do plan on shrinking the Cybertruck production model by around 3%, so it might be a tad smaller smaller than the prototype, but the prototype was pretty massive in the first place, so I know some people are upset by that, but both the Model Y and Model X do share a lot of similarities, and I think for most people the Model Y is going to be fine, but it makes sense to have a lot of diversification in your crossover lineup, because SUVs and crossovers in general are the most popular vehicle segment in the United States. People want something that can be sporty, but also be really practical, and also be able to fit lots of people inside of. The Cyber SUV could be amazing even if you don't plan on sitting 9 people in the vehicle, because whether you fold down that third row, or maybe they make a version of the Cyber SUV that just sits 6 and not 9, you would have a whole lot of enclosed cabin space back there, probably a lot more than the Model X, and if they could build it very, very similar to how they build the Cybertruck, that would result in the cost being somewhat similar to the Cybertruck as well. Just like with the Rivian R1T and the R1S, I'm sure that the SUV variant would be a bit worse range at a bit higher price. That's to be expected when you're hauling around some more equipment, and most of the renders I've seen for the Cyber SUV are probably not going to be as great for aerodynamics, because the back half of the vehicle doesn't slope down as much as it does on the Cybertruck. But just having a vehicle that, you know, people can load up canoes with and be throwing fishing rods and camping gear in the back of, and you don't really have to think that much about it, I think would be a whole lot more practical and approachable to people who plan on getting their vehicles dirty and plan on taking them off-road, where the Model X, just because it's so fancy and because it's so luxurious and now it's a $90,000 vehicle, it just makes it less approachable. And the Model Y is kind of fitting that same demographic as well. Fits well for the more suburban environment, but it's still gonna have paint, which can easily chip. It can easily run into cosmetic issues by just the kid opening the door and hitting it against another car, or parking barriers or that type of thing. So making an entire vehicle that could be easy to load stuff up with, easy to move things around, and yeah, for those big families who plan on having kids that are gonna grow past 5'6" and they don't want to be stuffed in the third row of the Model Y, maybe the Cyber SUV could start around $50,000, maybe 55, somewhere around there, and hopefully exceed the 300-mile mark. And because it's an SUV, I mean, I'm not even gonna say that it's crucial they make a tri-motor variant that goes over 500 miles. It would be nice, you know, people who are hauling around lots of camping equipment and taking around 7, 8, or 9 people wherever they're going, having that option to tow on great distances and not missing out on too much range would probably be very, very much preferred. And maybe that tri-motor variant could be more around the 400-mile mark, but still be sub $70,000. I just feel like there's a lot of room for practicality in a full-size SUV, and because crossovers are so popular, you know, Tesla is planning on making a third sedan that we could see by the end of this year with the Model 2. It's rumored to possibly be a 4-door vehicle, so that means we're gonna have the 4-door Model S, and of course the 4-door Model 3, and then the 4-door Model 2, and I just feel like there's a lot of redundancy here and a lot of attention going towards the sedan market, but in reality, crossovers and SUVs, at least in the United States, are by far the most popular variant, so they pretty much only have 2 right now, and one of those is insanely expensive and much more based on luxury and tech than it is on practicality and durability, which is why I think there's plenty of room in the lineup for a Cyber SUV to coexist alongside the Model Y and Model X. And I'm not saying get rid of the Model X, it could still stick around for those who like it, but I basically want the Cybertruck design aesthetic, and I want the Cybertruck practicality to find its way into more vehicles. I'm also a big fan of Tesla making a smaller, cheaper version of the Cybertruck, the Wolverine edition that Elon has talked about. I would love a Cyber sedan. I would love a Cyber semi. I don't really stop with the Cyber concepts, but I love the one Alwyn Art came up with, and I don't know how complicated or expensive it would be to design those kind of suicide-looking doors that open up down the middle. It looks very futuristic, but knowing how many issues they ran into with the Model X Falcon doors, I don't know how complex manufacturing would be if they tried to do that type of door mechanism on a Cyber SUV. But it looks cool nonetheless, and Tesla loves making weird and bizarre choices with their doors, so I would be all for it if they made something like that, but there might be some practical issues with getting into the front row when the door is sliding open like that. So interesting concepts nonetheless, and I would love to hear your guys' ideas. What would you like to see in a Cyber SUV? Honestly, I know for a long time Tesla has been talking about making a van, and someday they'll develop a van, but imagine if the Cyber SUV could kind of act as a van. You know, Elon talked about how with the Cybertruck, they're thinking about making the seats very modular and customizable. So if you're the type of person that really only drives the Cybertruck by yourself or maybe with one other person, they want the option to take out that back row so that you could have even more bed space and fit more stuff in the back, because you don't really plan on putting much people back there anyway. So if they could make more modular seats that could be easily removed by the user and apply that to the Cyber SUV, I imagine that variant of the SUV could act as a maintenance van for a lot of different demographics, and they can just pop those seats out, fill them up with storage space, and they would probably be great for Tesla service vehicles as well, and all kinds of different use cases. So I feel like there's a chance here maybe they can meet in the middle on developing a van but also an SUV, but no paint, make it super durable, use the same steel you're using for the Cybertruck. Whether or not Tesla does this will probably depend on how quickly and easily they can ramp the Cybertruck, which Elon says is going to be quite a challenge because there's never been a vehicle like this before. So I could see why they maybe steer away from doing more cyber vehicles if the truck ends up being way more complex than they thought. But either way, I want to see it, and I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts as well. Thank you all for watching. Hope you have an excellent rest of your day. Take care.